Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me, as always, is Ansgar, the comic book elitist, Odinson.
I kind of am a comic book elitist. That one stings. That one.
You're not really. You're
Ooh.
not really. You'll see anything as long as it's quality. That's all you care about. But it's
Yeah, I
I
mean,
figured
as
since
long as it's top tier. Yeah.
yeah. A couple of things to cover real quick, but one of them is
Mhm.
I did notice that the topic has changed for today.
Indeed it has. We had difficulty getting a hold of our guest, but fortunately, this was the topic, the show that we've been wanting to do. That just like I don't know, the universe conspired against us doing it, and there kept coming up things that like, oh look, this is in the way. We have to reschedule because we got this special guest that we can only get here, and this is the only time we can get them. But now we are actually doing um Disney and the art monopoly, and I'm actually excited because this is an important topic to me. In fact, the last time that we sort of brushed on this topic, you and I were discussing, and this is kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, is what importance fiction has in our culture, right? What is the
Mhm.
importance? Where is the value to fiction in our culture? And one of the places is, of course, it allows us to explore certain thought experiments, especially like in sci-fi and stuff like that. We can see, let's take this idea to the ultimate extreme, and how horrible can it go? Dystopian futures and things like that, without actually,
Uh,
lining people up and killing them.
yeah, well, we've had that discussion before because I write that kind of stuff, and people tell me they literally do. This was in if you see the movie Sideways, the guy says he writes fiction, and somebody says to him, "Oh, I don't read fiction. I don't like fiction because I prefer stuff that's real." And it's like, oh my God, give me. I get that all the time. It's insane. So, all right. Well, so we're without a guest. We switched the topic, but we just so and we've had this. Guys, if you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. And we are completely 100% Patreon supported. So if you want to support the show, please consider becoming a Patreon. Also, please like and subscribe. It really does make. I hate asking. I really do. I hate shilling my own my own stuff. But please like and subscribe. And I hopefully
What do they say
you
nowadays?
guys find.
Smash that like button.
Oh my God, I know. Oh God. Well,
Ring the
someday we'll get
bell.
all the bells and whistles. Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
have the whole thing just cascading down YouTube smash like all the advertising. But until such time, and then yeah, I think so. Please, hopefully you guys will like and subscribe, and again consider becoming a patron, and we'll get that membership system up and running at some point because we are now YouTube partners. But until such time, I think I'm looking forward to this topic. So Ansgar, where are we? What have we got here?
Okay. Um, so let's touch on, yes. So there is some significant value to I think that we've established in other shows. There's some significant value to fiction, and I think that fiction in general a lot of times gets kind of a raw deal when it comes to its perception. um you know
Hmm.
you know one of the things that there was, I forget the guy's name. People were talking about Star Wars, and he holds up this sign that says, it's a movie about space wizards with laser swords made for kids. Basically, and that's supposed to shut down the conversation. Like, you're not supposed to have any criticisms after that because it's just a fictional movie about magic and swords. So why should we care? Um, but of course, I think I would argue that no, these stories encapsulate a lot of our cultural values into them, and they've passed down cultural values. And look at what the cultural impact of Star Wars has been as a brand. There's no denying that it has completely changed our culture, completely.
Well,
You
and
know,
even there's there are a number of phrases that everybody knows them when live long and prosper, may the force be with you, from sort of cultural
Mhm.
holdovers from shows or movies that have been around even quite a long time. So, and I do think, now I assume Joseph Campbell and his work.
Mhm. Yes.
So Joseph Campbell did the hero's journey and the power of myth, and it's a whole series of it. What he talks about is Jungian archetypes, and Jung especially is getting a bad rap nowadays. I don't know why, but people are getting really pissed about Jung. But one of the things that Jung did was talked about archetypes, what we connect to almost as a species, as stories that you can find in every generation that last and in every culture, and how heroes are formed, how we what makes us connect to good guys, bad guys, and it's really some powerful work, and it had a tremendous influence on the original Star Wars trilogy. Hey, so and then
Mhm.
let's see, George Lucas. We've had this discussion before. He ended up getting too much control of his own product, and he wasn't forced to compromise. And he end up getting, as he gets more and more control,
Mhm.
they get worse and worse. And then eventually, he sold it to Disney.
Disney, which brings us here, and I think you're absolutely right. Well, one of the reasons the Jungian archetypes get so much shit right now is because of the whole. Some people really hate Jordan Peterson, and he's a bit of a religious apologist, and so that really immensely triggers some people. But yes, in stories and in fiction, I think that archetypes are very powerful, and they're very powerful for a reason. I think there are certain stories. The hero's journey is one of the most compelling stories that there is. We all want to feel like we can start from nothing and someday become something great and wonderful. But so we've come kind of into a Disney now. Now Disney isn't the only one doing this, but I do want to point out that Star Wars, in many ways, just as an example, changed the very trajectory of the film industry. Right, this is how powerful
Hmm.
this film was. They pretty much created the summer blockbuster. They created the idea of a film franchise. I mean, these films not only changed the way that we tell stories, but even the way we profit off of telling stories in things like merchandising and things like that. I mean, right now the ultimate goal of any studio is to launch a franchise, right? Like that's what studios set out to do sometimes, and they fail often now, because
Yeah.
people have gotten so cynical when they can tell, oh, you're just trying to set up a franchise. you know but
Well, and four out of five movies fail to make back the money that was put into the making of them. 4 out of 5. So they know that what they're banking on is the one that makes up enough money to make up for the losses on all those and
Mhm.
launch. And that's the goal. That's the trajectory. How can we do that? And Lord of the Rings was another great example of it. It's just like, and The Hobbit. The Hobbit should have been 1 3-hour movie, but they figured out,
Yes.
hey, let's take this one book and turn it into 3 movies. And they did the same thing with the final Harry Potter. They split it into 2 movies when it could have been, and half of it in the book was them just running through the woods. It's just like, we're running through the woods and we're yearning for and loving and arms getting ripped off, and you had to be there. But yeah,
It had to be there.
I think it I think it really damages the final product.
hmm and
What
the problem
and
is
let me one quick, and I want to can you
yeah.
think of, I had an example and I can't remember it, of like a movie where Pirates of the Caribbean. I liked the first
Mhm.
movie. The second one destroyed the first one. The first one was no good after the second because they bring back the main bad guy just because everyone likes his acting. Everybody, I mean, he just did a spectacular
Yeah.
job. So that in the second, spoiler, if you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean, spoiler, after the fact. Sorry. They utterly destroyed it.
See, you just
Can you think of any?
ruined my weekend. I was gonna finally watch those
Sorry.
shows now. No, I agree. Well, I mean, in the newest Disney one, they bring back, the Emperor, so it kind of spoils Vader's sacrifice, and that can be that can definitely be a problem with overreaching a franchise. They start to run out of ideas, so they just drag up the old ones that kind of worked.
Yep.
But and now we're getting into the problem of why the business model damages the art product. But I want to point out something, like, just as an example. We're going to use some financial data here, and I'm not using financial data to show how good the art is, right? How good a movie or
Okay.
a comic book or something like that is, right? Financial success is no metric of quality, but it is a
Quality,
metric of
yeah.
how much reach it has, how much it touches on culture, how much it. Now, it's not a perfect measure, but it does give us an idea of how many eyeballs are seeing it. It does give us an idea of how many people this product might touch. And out of the 10 largest movie franchises, we're talking about the ones that are currently valued the highest. Disney owns 4 of them. So
4 of top
40%,
10.
4 out of the top 10.
Yeah.
One company.
Wow.
One company. Now, the reason this is the reason this is a problem is, back when Star Wars was made, right? The very first movie. What you had was lots of different studios all competing. And so they were giving people like George Lucas, you know what? Let's take a chance on this guy. Let's roll the dice. You know what I mean? Let's a Maverick could come in and do something interesting. And so there was a lot of room for creative opportunities. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of room for creative opportunities for minorities and women. But the other,
Yeah.
as long as you were a white man, there were plenty of creative opportunities. But what we have now is, when you have 40% of the high grossing, the highest grossing franchises all owned under one roof, that means the same creative minds, the same creative decisions are being made, or I should say the same 40% of the let's say the big media right now is all being controlled by the same creative minds. It isn't a diversity of thought. It isn't a diversity of creative decisions, if that makes sense. And you can kind of see it in the industry, where every film studios we're talking about is now chasing the same business model, trying to set up the same thing, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so to speak.
Well, actually, the same thing happens in writing and in writing books. So there's a saying for authors: your first book is luck, nothing but luck. Your second book is skill. If your first book has skill and was well written, you'll get a second one out of it. But your first one just depends on where the market goes. All the agents care about is, and a good agent will be having lunch with all the publishing companies, and they'll find out where the publishing companies are going. The publishing companies are just trying to read the market and read what people like. And I had a buddy of mine who had a book which actually wasn't very well written at all, but he had it for 20 years, and nobody would take it. Nobody was interested. There was an agent who was just sitting on it. And the book was about a detective who followed religious mysteries, and is there a God, and maybe God's doing all these things and all this other stuff. Dan Brown comes out with the Da Vinci Code, and all of a sudden, poof, his book is just picked up. He gets a huge advance on it. They just want to go because they figure that's where the market's going. His book comes out, fails utterly. He never gets another one again. But what drove that book getting published had nothing to do with quality. It had to do with where the market was going, as far as the publishers could tell. And once they realized, oh no, this isn't really going to be a thing, then they sort of backed away from it. But they're constantly trying to move and judge the audience, and they don't seem to be very good at it, from what I can tell. At least not in publishing. I don't know about movies, but
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's just hard to predict where the market is going. You think it's going one direction, and it's it's like trying to predict what video is going to be viral. You just can't. You know. Yeah. It largely comes about of circumstances beyond anybody's understanding, really.
Yeah, Baby Shark caught us all by surprise.
I
Do you
am so
remember the
glad I've
dancing baby?
still never heard that.
Yeah, yeah, be glad.
Yeah.
I've heard it a few times, and then
Mhm.
my daughters like to play because they know I hate it. So I just took a spoon, shoved it in my ear, and found that to be significantly less painful than listening to it again. And it's worth the medical bills. Oh my
Mhm.
God. But it's almost as bad as that dancing baby. Remember I think it was the 80s or 90s, that dancing baby that would do and everybody was really, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden that baby started showing up and it was on Ally McBeal and was all these other, and
Oh
you'd
yeah.
see that baby everywhere. And then they actually there was a show I really liked. It was called Millennium, and very dark show. Very, very, there were demons and all this terrible stuff. And they put it in that too. I was just like, really?
Mhm.
Oh my God, just because it was it was the first meme, that idiotic dancing baby. So, why is this a problem?
Well, so so as you can see, a lot of this art is becoming rather formulaic. The basically the big studio heads have figured out that there is a formula for making a ton of money in movies. Same thing within comic books and in a lot of different things. Books in once they figure out or even think they've figured out a formula, then what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to stick to that formula. And they're not really artists, they're not creatives. They're the ones greenlighting creative projects, or even putting limits on creative projects. Like, we need you to do this because we're this is where we want the market to go. This is what's going to make us money. And
So,
the issue with that, I mean, that's not an issue in and of itself. If you've got one studio, this is just how they do business. This is what they think is an award winning, a or money winning way to make movies. Okay, so what? Not a big deal.
mhm,
You get
mhm.
there's other studios out there. But when all of those studios start getting absorbed under, a few roofs the way they are now, then what you get is, other than independent films, which even independent films are starting to, like, there are independent film studios now, and they're big studios and not really what the idea of an independent movie used to be, if that makes sense. They're just
Yep,
not
yep.
Disney. They're not Fox. They're not, whatever.
Well, and a lot of
So
these,
you've got
yep,
go for it. Go for it.
please. Well, a lot of
But
these, so I'm trying to remember. There was the Matt Damon one, but that one's gotten bigger. Dream, not DreamWorks, but DreamWorks got absorbed. So did Pixar,
Mhm.
and so a lot of these independent ones that have gotten absorbed and don't necessarily do the same kind of work that they used to.
That's very true. When Pixar, I would venture to say Pixar was at its best, before it became a subsidiary of Disney. Yeah, they used to produce things that would then get distributed by Disney. Disney was their distributor, but now they've been, completely absorbed. Video games are having the same problem. Blizzard used to be an incredible independent studio, and once they got absorbed by Activision, well, just ask Blizzard fans what they feel about Blizzard right now. It's been a significant
Yeah,
controversy. I don't know if you've heard about that. They actually
I've
went
heard some
back and
about it.
screwed up an old game.
Well, what they? Oh, yeah, because they were changing it to meet the standards of the Chinese, if I recall.
Well, that
Is
was
that the
that
one
was
you're
a
talking about,
different.
or?
Yes. Well, they did that with Hearthstone. They changed a bunch of things. They changed World of Warcraft to meet the standards of the Chinese. But no, they recently announced that they were remastering, reforging an old classic, one of their classic games, Warcraft 3. They did that. They didn't deliver on any of the promises. They had they had basically farmed out most of the work to a Malaysian studio,
Uh-huh.
and it looks like crap. None of the promises they made have been kept, and even worse, if you wanna just keep playing the original Warcraft 3, too bad. It's been updated to the new Reforged interface, which is buggy and crappy and cuts out a ton of features. And the only thing is, if you didn't pay for the Reforged, you just don't get the updated visuals. Well, updated.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty bad. And that's the thing, is they know they can make money, and they don't care. And that's another part of the problem is, we could even argue that, Disney himself, when he started the Disney Corporation, he was a creative guy. Whatever other things you want to levy against this character, he was a creative guy. He wasn't a purely business guy. And but the people who are in charge of Disney now are purely business people. And so, they're making decisions based on what's going to make money. They're not necessarily making decisions on what is going to be a good artistic, endeavor. And so that's a problem as well. And this is arguably, I would say, movies and television are probably the art that has the most impact on our culture, the greatest impact on our culture. I don't know if you would. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I would. I find it unfortunate, especially as a writer, but I do concur with that, just because it's an easier medium to digest rapidly, and it's changing. But it's also, I think, a topic for another time is how this is influencing us. So, right now it's I show my kids some older movies that I think they're going to like, even ones that were for kids but older, and they're like, "It goes so slow, Daddy. Why has it?" I was like, "It's called plot development." But okay, fine, sure. So yeah, um, uh, that's had an impact, I think, on us, and I think there's a drive to in order to keep attention spans, make things go faster, more bright lights, shining, and that's
Yeah.
hard to do, obviously, in writing. So it's a powerhouse, and I think that reminds me a little bit of that scene in Minority Report where he's walking down. It's just like all these ads are coming up at him, and all these things are happening, and it's just, yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's the visual and the quick absorbed media that's getting people.
This has changed a lot too when it comes to our cultural attention span. The cell phone. I mean,
Mm.
the way that the cell phone has grabbed our attention, right? Most people cannot sit through an hour-long show without at some point being on Twitter or Facebook or something like that. Yeah, exactly. That's
What?
how they're watching
Oh,
their show.
sorry. What were you saying? I'm listening. No, I agree that Abraham Lincoln did a spectacular. Sorry, was that the topic?
No, we were talking about something else.
Oh,
Though I can't remember what,
okay.
because I looked at my cell phone.
Jesus.
uh, I mean, I've gone to movie theaters and seen people who can't turn off their damn cell phones during the movie, and that, I think that goes to another reason why movies are getting more flashy and less substantive, is you almost have to, if you want to keep people's attention from start to finish.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, as a little bit of an aside, I don't know if this is entirely on topic. My father um, had a ferocious cigarette habit, a minimum of 2 packs a day. I mean, 2 full packs, so I'd go through a carton in less than a week easily. And he couldn't go more than an hour without smoking. So we would measure movies by how many cigarettes he had during the movie, because of course he can't smoke in the theater, so he'd have to get up and leave. If it's a mediocre movie, that would be 3 or 4 cigarettes. So, how many cigarettes was this movie? Well, 4 cigarettes. Okay, it was a mediocre movie. Terrible movie, 6 cigarettes. Really good movie, 2, maybe even 1 cigarette. There's only been a couple of no cigarette movies, and I think that also goes to the
Yeah, it's
same
probably
kind
about
of
the
thing. It
same
was just
thing.
yeah, it would
This
measure.
was a
So that's
four
it for
text movie.
yeah, exactly. How many? But the difference is you don't have to leave the theater to use this. Or like you could get in trouble for doing it. But for the cigarettes, it was just, yeah. How long could it hold his attention? Das Boot was the first no cigarette movie. But yeah,
That's a fantastic movie, by the way.
it's the same thing. Yeah, that's a brutal film. But yeah, it definitely shows you how it works.
Do you want to hear something slightly alarming? So earlier I had said that Disney owns 4 out of the 10 top movie franchises, right?
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
this number changes if you narrow it to the most recent decade, 5 to 10 years, because a lot of the film franchises on that list have had years to make more money, like James Bond. If you narrow it to just the active financial period of the last 10 years, Disney owns 7 of the 10 highest grossing franchises.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, of the
pretty.
top 10, they
So
own 7.
so obviously, I mean, first of all, there's going to be a CEO to Disney, to any corporation. They're going to pick a direction in which they want to go. Disney does seem to have some degree of, and this is one reason why Disney has sort of um, sub studios that can do different kinds of work that might not want to be associated with Disney. That's a bit more adult. But so The Mandalorian is a reasonably good show. It's it doesn't quite feel Disney, but it is Disney. That idiotic opening is feels Disney, but nonetheless. So, is there room to maneuver within a company? Do you think inside a corporation? How much is the direction limited, and is there a way around this kind of problem?
Well, there is definitely, like, The Mandalorian certainly breaks the mold, the Disney mold, in a number of ways, and I do think there's always going to be outliers like that. Directors who have been able to, finagle the system and get their creative way, and usually that has a lot to do with their portfolio. If they can say, "Listen, I worked for this. They wanted to put these limitations on me on this other studio. I worked for this other studio, and they let me have my free reign. And look how successful it was. You know what I mean? Or they might be able to. Maybe they're really good at they talk. Let's say someone like Kathleen Kennedy, who's kind of at the head of the Star Wars branch, and they talk her into talking to the higher execs and saying, "Listen, we got to give this producer or this director or whatever a chance to really, make it their way." So there is room for that, but it does take an extraordinary amount of pull and influence in one way or another, which means that it really creates a system where most artists, most creatives within that system have to work within these narrow boxes. And then every once in a while, if somebody is able to really climb to the top and really distinguish themselves, they get the chance to make something that's outside of that mold, that's outside of that box. So yes, there is room to do that, but unfortunately, it is the exception and not really the rule. And you can kind of see, I mean, if you go to see I don't know if you've noticed, if you go to see any Marvel movie, they almost all have the same story. You know what I mean? They almost all have hit the same plot beats, have the same pacing, all the superheroes look like, I mean, even the visuals, all the superheroes look like they shop at the same place for their super suits. You know what I mean? Like, there's like those superhero outfitters, and they all went there. So, that's an issue. Now, how do we avoid it? I think
What's
that
the
these big
story? Just out of curiosity. So what's the main story? I think you had told me this before, but it was really interesting. and I wanted to discuss what's that. You said there's basically sort of one story that's in all of them. What is that story?
Okay, so it usually starts off with the hero has to basically gets knocked down in some way. Either now usually they have to learn a lesson. Usually they get knocked down in some way. Then they have to learn some kind of lesson. Then they get their strength back, and they defeat the bad guy. Oftentimes there's a love story involved. And there's we go further into detail, but they pretty much all do that. Now, that wouldn't be such a problem if all the Marvel movies didn't feel like they're paced exactly the same. You know what I mean? Like the pacing and the beats to the story feel very similar. It's almost hard. It's like if you watch one Marvel movie by itself, it can be kind of enjoyable. But if you like line up like, okay, I'm going to watch all three of these movies today, it's like, wow, I feel like I just watched this.
Now you see this. I completely agree. I hadn't noticed it till you pointed that out. It's like you had pointed out also, and you mentioned this earlier before, that I didn't think of it this way, but that the death of bringing the Emperor back, of course, nullified, which you had mentioned earlier, Darth Vader's sacrifice, which I thought was an interesting. I hadn't viewed it that way, but I think that's a really great point. And so I think you made a good point here. But I did cut you off, so you were about to say too, I think, how to get around it or how to fix it.
Oh yeah, how to get around how to fix it? Well, honestly, it feels to me like there's only one option. These giant conglomerates.
No, we are not. We are not napalming. We are not napalming Disney. We had this discussion, and I said, don't bring that up on the air. You don't, Ansgar. You don't. And I know you kind of wanted to make your own little nuke, a la the Manhattan Project kind of thing. No, Ansgar. No, we can't. We can't. Down.
All right, fine. Angry mobs. Can we do angry mobs?
No, and no angry mobs. No torches. No, we can't use an Iron Maiden. We can't use please get the we've had this discussion. Please, and I wouldn't mind because if you go to jail, okay, fine. But Growly and think of the children. I just no.
Icarus has a great suggestion. We can Death Star Disney. We build a Death Star, name it a Disney.
Are there any less violent options on the table?
All right. We could break up the monopolies.
Right, I'm plus, so I know. But anyways, please break up monopolies. Okay.
Seriously, I think in the past, one of the big dangers, and I've talked about this danger before. Let's go beyond just them controlling art. One of the ways that our democracy was threatened in the past was there was, and I believe it was Carnegie, who bought up pretty much all of the major newspapers in the country and forced them to run whatever stories, whatever narratives, whatever. They had to say whatever he wanted them to say, and it helped install a fucking president. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that Disney necessarily has some malicious plot to subvert our democracy, but when you let one go ahead, please.
William Randolph Hearst.
It was there. You go.
Carnegie did it too, but it was William Randolph Hearst. Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Please.
No, thank you for the correction. And those two men conspired together, so it wasn't exactly like they
were.
So the other newspapers that were bought by Carnegie were running the same narratives and stories too. So yeah, it was Hearst. But that's the thing. If I'm not saying Disney does have that kind of malicious intent, but
you're not saying Disney kicks puppies. No.
I'm just saying they might accidentally step on them along the way.
They might be a little fascist, just a little. Okay.
Yeah. No, but it does. If they have if they had a, I don't know that they do, I don't care, but if they do have a political bent, whether left wing, right wing, what, centrist, whatever, that's going to come out in their media. And when they have such a dominant hold over the media that is most impactful on our culture, I think that there is significant danger in that. Um, all media that we create is going to have biases, and I would rather have a more diverse group of biases, so that people aren't necessarily always being bombarded one way or the other. You know what I mean? And I think there has been some fan reaction to this. We've seen a lot of people, you know, I would say overreact to, woke media. There's some kind of an agenda, and people there have been some significant fan backlashes to that kind of thing.
So, breaking up breaking up any monopoly can be difficult. I do believe in doing it, but there are people who are sort of against it because they say, okay, free hand of the market. Usually it is considered because they have too much economic power. Is that the argument here, or is it important for another reason? Because we haven't been talking necessarily their economic power, although they can stifle some competition, obviously. Is that the concern, or is it, because it sounds like it's a bit more of an artistic concern, which I agree with, but is hard to write into U.S. law?
Mm. Well, I think that there is the artistic concern, but I also think that part of the artistic concern comes from the financial concern. When,
Mm-hmm.
as an example, if 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 every release window is dominated by a media giant, right? How are you going to
Mm-hmm.
compete? What are you going to put your film up against Star Wars? Okay, no, you can't do that. So you move it. Shit, now Harry Potter's coming out with a movie. Okay, can't do that. All right. So we'll move the release window. Oh wait, they're doing a live action of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Shit, can't release then. So we'll move the release window again. Oh, sorry, there's a new Predator movie coming out. You know what I mean? Whatever. So there's always gonna, when all the release windows are dominated by these huge studios, you really don't have the same chance to make like this breakout film that Star Wars was. I mean, Star Wars came out of nowhere. By all accounts, it should have been like this nothing film, but you couldn't have put Star Wars out there to break out like that if every release window had a Gone with the Wind in it.
Yep. All right, that makes. Well, I mean, yeah. I probably wouldn't have gone with the Wind. I'm just saying, but that's all right. So all right. Well, okay. So that makes a lot of sense. So you're thinking break them up as a monopoly. Any other thoughts as to ways in which maybe smaller studios can break out themselves?
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, I think that companies like Netflix, like Amazon Prime, and things like that, they offer a significant opportunity for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's difficulty in that, and you still have to have some studio power, but there's that. The other thing that needs to happen, and this is, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to accomplish this. Maybe your mind can. But the problem is that, and I've mentioned this before, in all of these creative industries, whether be it games, be it movies, be it television, be it comics, it doesn't matter. There was a time when all of these industries were started by creative people who just wanted to create a product that they enjoyed creating. And what happened was they hired business people to help them sell that product. As time went on, they went into the market, they sold shares and things like that, and pretty soon the entire business model was flipped on its head. And now what you have is the business people are now the ones in charge, and the the creative people are merely a resource, a human resource to be tapped to create a marketable product. And so there has to be a way to flip that script and turn it back the other way, but I'm not sure how that even can happen.
Um, I I don't see that as a problem in the slightest, and I would like to say that on behalf of YouTube and Google Corporation that you aren't speaking for In Time in any way whatsoever, and we here do love our corporate overlords and have no interest in anything artistic in the slightest. Please do not demonetize us. Please do not. There's nothing creative or artistic here. Please go away.
Hey, got a
Yeah.
little right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. No, I don't know how to deal with that. I think there's always going to be a tension there, and that's unfortunate. I think in a capitalist society, you're always going to have that. There are times that that tension actually creates a better product. But I think those
Mhm.
that's more the exception. That's not usually
Right.
what happens. It does happen, and it works out that there are really good products that couldn't have made it without finding a way through that tension. But usually, then once there is a high level of success, that can tank it. But I do think I think that process may be sometimes underestimated in its what it can produce. But I think more often than not, it's negative than a positive. I do concur with that, and I don't know the answer. But for there was an interesting. I think it was Babylon 5. There was a society where basically artists were in fact the most revered, and artists didn't make any money, no money, but
Mm.
you could identify them and they were part of a caste, and so they didn't have to pay for anything either. So it was just sort of like if they walked into a restaurant, it was just like their meals were free, and it was considered a um, a privilege to have them there. They weren't like, oh God, I got to pay this. Like, no, come in. Oh God, we wouldn't take your money even if you had it, kind of. And I think anything short of that. But I do think, and this is the only other John Stewart. John Stewart's a good example of actually where that tension produced better results. John Stewart said at one point, and I thought this was interesting, he said that creativity needs restrictions in order to operate. And I think that's true. The way I look at it is sort of water. If you have a valley and water is going into that valley and the water just goes, you could have a huge amount of water, but if it's allowed to go over the entire valley, it's going to take forever before anyone even notices that there's water there. If you channel it in a
Um,
river, you can have a really
the
powerful,
chat,
yes,
by
I'm
the
sorry.
way, is saying we lost connection.
Oh, all right. Well, let's,
Apparently, Disney is trying to take us offline.
oh boy, well, that's it. Yeah. So,
Okay, apparently we're back. So keep going.
all right. Well, I don't, so waters, valleys, mountains, the whole nine yards. If you take that same amount of water and channel it into a river, if you restrict it and you have it go in a specific direction you can create a huge, powerful river. But that only comes from those restrictions. And when Jon Stewart talks about what he did on the Daily Show, one of the things he says is, well, you know people would say, do this, do this, do this. We're like, no, that's outside the box of what we do. And it sounds like going outside the box is a great idea, but that box actually forced us to come up with creative solutions to problems. It's necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that sometimes the business side can do that. Again, I think that that's often the exception and not the rule, but there may be ways, I would imagine, to increase the success of that kind of thing. And it may require also some change in
I
how artists look at it, some change in how the businessmen look at it.
I think it has a lot to do with the ratio too. When the business side of it, for instance, let's go back to the original, Star Wars. There were constraints put on that by business, and that made an amazing product. One thing is he had to, collaborate with other artists. Another thing was that he had to, fit within a certain budget, and he had to make a product that was potentially able to sell. He couldn't just make a dream product that nobody was interested in. He had to make sure that there were elements and things that people would be interested in. The problem comes, I think, when that delicate balance tips so heavily into business that that it just becomes that just a product. It's no longer a artistic endeavor that we're going to market. It is a product that you've hired artists to create. You know what I mean? I think there's a significant difference between those things.
I think that's an excellent point. Excuse me. That's why I think it takes some compromise on both sides. I think artists need to realize that some restrictions probably is a benefit, and being forced to collaborate can be a benefit, often is a benefit. But I think you're right, and I think the businesses need to realize that the second they really turn this into a market and a sort of a McDonald's kind of process that we're just putting this stuff out, they do a tremendous amount of irreparable damage. The other thing about the original Star Wars is the people who worked on that original Star Wars are still getting royalties from it. So when you talk about, yeah, I think people just look at what the numbers were at the box office and all this other, but Star Wars, really, people can still be getting royalties from that. Well, obviously there are states. 100 years from now, it's that good, and we still see movies that are much older. The industry
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been around long enough to really, but if you take a look at, speaking of William Randolph Hearst, if you take a look at, oh God, what was it? Citizen Kane,
Mm-hmm.
Casablanca. These are movies that, and the technology has gone well in excess. So you're looking at a black and white movie, but the reality is these are still, and take a look at how much they've influenced Casablanca in particular. So many people quote Casablanca all the time and have no idea that they're quoting it. None. Enter the
Yeah.
Dragon, the same thing happened too. So I think if they realize that they can be building something that's going to last a tremendously long time, that may influence how they look at it. But there is business incentivizes short-term thinking over long-term thinking. It really does. That's why the 2007 collapse happened. Businesses were over leveraging to get immediate results, knowing that they were sacrificing the future. But the reality is most of the people who were making these sacrifices could bail on golden parachutes before the companies went under, which is roughly what happened. Um, so they were incentivized for short-term gains, bail, and now they're filthy rich despite the damage they've done.
That actually segues into a great comment we got from Intrigued Feline, who asks, "What about products that are done tremendously well and are quite successful, but then deemed not successful enough to be prolonged?" Yeah, that's a real issue. When a lot of these companies, because of how large they've gotten and how successful some of their franchises have been, their idea of what success is gets raised so high that you can make an amazing show or a movie, make money. It's a money making, but you didn't make all of the money. You know what I mean? So, sorry, it's just not worth our time anymore. And there's another way that this way of doing business is stifling a lot of art and creativity.
I'd address the question, but I don't. Listen, I like cats, but I don't take questions from cats. Dogs, maybe, not cats. They've got too much
Well, I
attitude.
mean, they do. But
Yeah.
that
Yep.
was
Yep.
a and Ghost Dog says yes. Mickey sneaks up behind you with a bat to hit you in the knees, saying, "Do what we say now."
That's an
um,
interesting take on Mickey. Oh, and we
yeah,
uh
we're not
Kyle
going to be
Sir.
discussing that today because it's off topic. So yeah, that's not something we're
Yeah.
going to be
So,
discussing today.
but you know what? Why don't you if you hop into the Discord, ask that question. I would be happy to discuss it. So, we appreciate the super chat, but that's from another show. Hop in the Discord. We'll get that link out to you. We discuss that on the lounge or any other. We'll be happy to discuss that with
Yeah.
you.
But no, I think that raises a lot. That I think that's something I maybe even overlooked when in this discussion so far is a significant amount of stifling. If you're, it creates this bar that you have to reach of financial success if your art is going to be continued. which for many things is just not sustainable. It means that only things that appeal to the broad mainstream are going to be allowed to continue. And, kind of in the past, it was okay that there were niche genres, you know what I mean? And I'm hoping that what this does is it creates a vacuum, you know what I mean, for the niche genres, and that, independent studios will be able to flood into those vacuums. But so far, we haven't exactly seen that, except for maybe in horror.
And we've so I was about to kick out the cat because cats have attitudes and cause trouble, but our resident supervillain has finally showed up, and he has put in a link to the Discord. And we've had a couple of those discussions in the Discord, so everyone can join us. But yeah, I juggle kittens now, so I kick puppies, I juggle kittens, and I think there's a couple other. Oh joy! So all right. Well, is there anything else? I think. Well, actually, there was one I wanted to. There was two things. First of all, it seems to me that there may be an ebb and flow to this,
Mm-hmm.
which I think you'll find in most industries anyway. But if what it seems to me is when one of these corporations, like we're having now, like Disney's doing now, starts to get a huge amount of control, everybody has to fall in line, or else they're in trouble. And then you get the market gets saturated with those kind of ideas and that kind of art, and everybody has to do that. Everybody starts to get bored with it, and the corporation just keeps pumping out more and more and more, and they're wondering why they're getting less bang for their buck on it. And then somebody thinks outside the box to come up with something new. Poof, it comes out, and then everything starts to change and go in that direction. And then the whole cycle starts again, where people are really interested in more and more creativity. There's a boom in the creativity. You get a golden age, a silver age, whatever you're going to get, and then the corporations start to take that over, consolidate, and then you get the whole cycle over again. People start to get bored because they're just turning. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I mean, this is why we have like the Silver Age comics, the Golden Age comics, and so on and so forth. And let's and the other way that it can happen actually is an industry can crash because they get so rote. The video games industry crashed. I mean, it completely bottomed out. And what happened was the people who were these little tiny studios that were left that didn't get demolished by this, they were the ones that ended up having to pick up the pieces, and that restarted the video game industry. So some of these industries might have to be allowed to fail.
Yeah, I do think that's and again, Ayn Rand, creative destruction, yada yada yada. I do think there is truth to that. So is that where you think this is headed? Do you think where do you think? I don't think that the government is going to intercede and break up Disney. So where do you think this is going to be headed in the future?
Well, I think some of the industries are going to crash. I think that video games are going to crash at some point. I think that the comic book industry also likely going to have a big crash, and we'll see the rise of. We're already actually seeing the first signs of the crash in the comic book industry. Mainstream comic sales are way down, and indie and little indie projects are getting huge backing on things like crowdfunding and stuff like that. I don't think the same thing will be true for the movie industry. I just don't. I think that we will get some industry shakeups here and there. And I think something like what you're saying will probably happen, where somebody comes out with some new stuff. And as long as the big corporations, the big media giants keep on this particular path, I think they'll just absorb those studios that are doing something great. And then everything will just be a new. I don't know what's going to happen. Eventually, something's got to give, but I don't know what's going to give in the immediate future of the movie industry. That's the difficult part. Something will give at some point. What it is, I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to happen in the immediate future. We're not seeing any signs of like a big, change in the business model of the movie studio just yet. And so far, every time there's been a big creative change, like, oh, now superheroes are the new best thing. Well, just buy out all the superhero studios, and oh, look, this new thing is the big thing. Oh, just buy out all those studios, and that's what's been happening so far. So I'm not sure that the normal ebb and flow is going to take care of this one, unless there
Mhm.
is a moment where there's some kind of a change like that the movie studios refuse to adopt, or adopt so poorly that it crashes them. You know what I mean? And does some kind of significant damage, because something has to give that stops them from just absorbing more and more and more studios, basically just sucking up what was their once competition.
Uh, Excuse me. I think that's a good point. I do think that, I mean, regrettably, I think what's going to happen is Star Wars is going to become at some point reasonably soon. It's going to become oversaturated, and people are going to get so
Hmm.
sick of it. It's going to become like a pejorative. People are going
Yeah.
to like jumping a shark, like any like failed TV show. It's going to be a failed. It's just like we're so sick of that, and nobody's going to appreciate it or enjoy it anymore. I think my suspicion is that's where it's headed, at least for that property. I don't know how badly that's going to affect Disney, even though they have invested a tremendous amount in it. I think they're big enough they can survive it and they'll turn around. But yeah, I do think
Yeah, I
that's.
do think Star Wars is headed that way. I mean, already, um, if you go into the numbers on let's say like toy sales, Luke Skywalker and all of those original toys still outsell anything from the
Mhm.
prequels, and certainly anything from the sequels. You know, they don't
Yep.
have the, and I don't think 20 years from now people will be quoting the new movies. I don't. I think that it's lost a lot of its cultural power.
I think that's true. I think there's such a rush. I don't think they're spending enough time on it. That's the other thing. And we talked about it. I mean, for me, it always gets back to the literary industry, but um, people always ask why is the a writer's breakout novel, the first one that's really really good and makes them a lot of money. Again, Dan Brown, that was the Da Vinci Code. He had written other ones. Why is it always their best? Very simple, because they spend years refining it while they're trying to get it agented, while they're trying to get it. They just spend years working on it, and then it comes out great. But then they're so successful that publishers will say, "We'll publish your laundry. Let's just get it to us and get it to us now." And they spend a lot less time on it, and of course they do, because it's like there's so much pressure to get it out, and they're going to get paid as long as it's reasonable quality, and that the quality goes down because the demand goes up, which is an interesting side effect. So, all right. Well, I think we should start wrapping this up. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on or cover before we wrap this up?
The only thing the only thing I want to say is I have a lot of love for the movie industry, to be quite honest. Not the way it is now, but in general, the endeavor of making movies and bringing stories to the big screen. I have a lot of love for it. A lot of love for comics. I have a lot of love for a lot of this stuff, and I want to see it. I want to see independent voices have more of a shot of rising. It's not that I think that all independent voices need to rise, it's that they need a fair shot to rise. And the current industries as they are, they're just not out there. And if we ever want to see, people talk about, we need more, let's say, diverse voices, writing scripts and doing all this stuff. The thing is, they're doing it. The thing is, though, is if they don't create a product that has mass mainstream appeal, good luck getting anybody to greenlight it in this current market. And that's a significant issue. And if we want to see if we want to see more of these diverse voices, more of these diverse creative minds, more diversity in our media, the best way to do it is to change the way we do business, change the incentives.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. Just a couple of quick reminders. So, presumably tomorrow, I don't know if we're gonna. It looked like I think Wednesdays were the only days that we could really do the show on organ donations. So that was supposed to be today. We did have to change that out at the last minute. With any luck, we can do it tomorrow. This was tomorrow's show, and we just had to swift them. Oh my God, I may need a little more.
Is that
sleep.
a word? Swift.
It is now. I am a writer. I'm authorized to invent words. I'm authorized to invent words. I have a degree in it.
That sounds like something from like
Jersey,
bullshit, like, you know, like grizzled cop from some, you know. They got swift.
They got swift, yeah. So hopefully we'll have that show tomorrow. If we don't, I don't know if we'll be able to come up with another show rapidly. I will say I will be the featured speaker tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern on New Mexico's, wow, excuse me, New Mexicans for Science and Reason. They wanted someone to talk to them about the importance of critical thinking. So that will be tomorrow. We will drop that in the Discord for anyone who wants to see that. It's supposed to be streamed, but I've seen their tech guy. We hope. And then next week, we're going to have Lilith Unchained on to discuss her deconversion story, which is a reasonably difficult one. So she will be on the 18th. And then on the 25th, Was Jesus Real? We will have on Dr. Richard Carrier, who now the current historical consensus is Jesus did in fact exist. There is not many mainstream historians who think he walked on water, but there are plenty who the consensus is that he existed. Dr. Richard Carrier says no, and he can prove it. So he will be on the 25th to discuss that. In the meantime, I think we will be in the Discord. We'll be discussing that issue that came up earlier, and any other issue that anyone wants to discuss. We hope you will join us there. And until then, we look forward to seeing you guys next time.
See ya.
Good night, all.